People oftentimes say they want honesty, and yet when you say it, they never can seem to take it. Trust and believe when I say that trust and believe when I say the no snitch policy in the Black community will be the very demise of that community. It's spoken right there. See, to know where I come from and understand where I grew up is to in fact know just what I'm speaking on. The no snitch policy is going to be the very death, as in the takeout of the Black community. Because to sit amongst criminals of various kinds and as well as understand that many of those criminals are in fact child molesters and everything else, committing black on black crime, terrorism, that type of thing could very be the death of you yourself, as in the individual playing the part of keeping secrets and knowing that the criminal, see, because where I came from, one of the main reasons of why I had to move out, as in leave, is because individuals like that, they know criminal activity is going on, as in other people is being killed or babies being beaten to death, half to death, and even to death. And not only that, being molested on top of it. And yet nobody speaks up, as in come forward and say. That poses problems. It fragments a community, as in Black individuals, and even Blacks as a whole, as in family members. It does. To keep a secret like that is to understand and know why the Black community is in fact becoming more fragmented, despite it being blamed on other races of people. To know that things are going on within a community, as in criminal activity, young children being molested and all that, is to say. I'm repeating myself, and yet it's the truth. Sometimes you get tired of seeing stuff so much, you gotta walk away, as in move away, as in go outside somewhere else where that type of stuff isn't going on. Because see, to know and understand that you are in an environment, whether it's the hood or even Black, living out in the suburbs and being surrounded by, say, other Blacks that might in fact know what is going on in the household, that's enough to do damage even on your own mind. Despite damage is being done on that young mind, who could in fact be being molested or beaten on or whatever, the two. That stuff, it poses problems, is what I'm trying to say, in relation to communities of people. It breaks down the structure even more, because to know and understand that somebody is being beaten on or possibly molested is to know that individual is going to grow up completely damaged. And not only that, they might take it upon themselves to repeat the same actions, as in what has happened to them. They might do that to their own children. Who knows? A cycle has to be broken. And not only that, I just sense wholeheartedly this whole non-snitch policy, as in knowing what is happening and what's going on between the four walls of people's house and yet never saying nothing. I think to never say something is childish in itself. Those type of individuals I cannot be bothered with. I can't be surrounded and bothered in no type of environment with individuals who know certain things that might have played out, saying other people's houses, state to state, and then not say nothing. Because I'm a forthright individual. Forthright means to be highly outspoken and direct, which is why some individuals don't like me, yet I don't care, which is why some individuals shun me, and yet I don't care. Because to be childish, as in not speaking what you know, even in the help solve some of these other cases going on that you figure something has happened, is to say it. Because only childish people sit back and watch other people and whisper. That's what I'm trying to say. I ain't never been one to just sit back and whisper. People on various jobs, one thing they can say that they remember about me is the fact of how vocal I was. Sometimes to the extremity of speaking up about certain things in the area of people being abused, misused, and mistreated. Yes, I was one of the first individuals to come out and say stuff. I didn't have a choice. I even witnessed, even on a college campus, a professor mistreating a student in the worst way that you should mistreat an individual, because her mother died and this professor totally disrespected this individual. Had no sympathy, empathy, or nothing for her. Totally disrespected her in her misery. Like just spit in her face. And I had no choice but to tell him off in front of the classroom. That sort of thing, it's not really me being overprotective, but it's just seeing the matters and getting at the heart of the matter for what it is. As in being involved when you see that something's completely not right, it's completely wrong. I ain't want to sit back and be gentle. That's what I'm trying to say. And whoever I offend in the process, I can no longer be, having a care in the world about that, because that's an issue in itself. It is. Just think of all the issues that we have all around us, and yet a person or two or maybe 10, 20, 30 individuals never got involved in saying something like, something about this is not right. Just as look at how many lives possibly would have never been saved and could have possibly been discarded for the simple fact an individual or many wasn't open enough to come out and say something, as in be forward and direct. I like forward and direct individuals. I do. Very forward, that's peach water. Very forward and direct individuals, they help to get things solved, as in resolved. I like those type of people. And that's not to down or degrade individuals who are in fact more silent. That's not to say that. Because in certain matters, I myself am in fact silent about certain things. That's just a human characteristic. And at times can be a flaw. Because to once again not step up and say something could help lead to people's demise, as in a prevention. See, you have in various environments, when I said like the no snitch policy, black on black crime is completely crime laden, as in heavy, as in a twist and turn of various things happening and yet not being exposed. And yet individuals sitting back. See, that's one thing that turns me off. It turns me off to hear people who want their 15 minutes of fame by sitting up here bragging about what they know about, say, this person was being beaten on. I'm saying in black communities and even in neighborhoods, say people live, or even in black folks' families, of people bragging about the fact that they know such and such was being beaten on or such and such was being molested, right? And so to obtain their 15 minutes of fame, they just walk around secretly whispering it to each other to feel important. That makes absolutely no sense. It's disgusting is all I'm trying to say. To want to say, oh, I know such and such was being beat on, and I know such and such was being molested. Black families do that type of stuff all the time. To feel important. They even go without the four walls of their own family and get to talking on the outside of the house about them knowing what has happened, occurred, or what is going on with some of these young children. And yet their identity is completely hidden, because to want to be a braggart, as in bragging, about what you know to other people is to feel some sense of acclaim, like world acclaim. People, I don't like stuff like that. I just feel like that's death on a person's hands. You put yourself, you became a part of a situation by building that situation into the demise in which it stands. I'm speaking across all things, just not missing persons. Just not missing persons, even in the realm of black on black crime. I don't like that. I don't like that. Now, I ain't never trying to be a part of any type of community where that type of thing go on. May God, the universe, never allow me to be in environments like that where people are too afraid to snitch. And yet many of them, it has no fear. Like, fear ain't even at play. Because see, to sit back bragging to other people about, say, an individual being abused in their home, you know, or their boyfriend or lover killed their child or whatever done happened, that thing is the type of thing which should be discussed amongst the authorities instead of, say, discussing it within your house or even walking up and down the street with people. I don't like stuff like that. That's an issue. I ain't never liked stuff like that. So you feel safe. I'm trying to say for the individuals that keep the secret like that. So you trying to say, in a sense, you feel more safe bragging about the fact that you know that, say, a father could have killed his child, and yet you won't take it to police. That's petty mindset. You can't see. There was, in fact, an individual that I was friends with. This was back in the year of 2007. 2007, I was friends with an individual way before then, but her son was actually killed going into the year of 2008. Her boyfriend was, in fact, beating and torturing on her young child. He wasn't even at the age of 5 years old yet. A baby. 2.5 years old, right? She allowed her boyfriend to beat on this young baby. He killed the baby. The hospital, when whatever they got the child to the hospital. I'm sorry, I said 2.5. I'm sorry, 1.5. Sorry, I'm sorry about that. This girl was, in a sense, terrified of her boyfriend, right? She was terrified of her boyfriend. She allowed him to put his hands on her baby. Because we had worked together. It was my very first time meeting this baby. My very first time. 2007 was the first time I met that baby, and the next time I seen him was when his face was all plastered on the news about the fact that he had been killed by the mother's boyfriend because he had unresolved anger issues. See what I'm saying? And yet, I was in total, utter, deep shock and sadness because by then I had moved away to another state. I had moved in with my brother, but I was trying to understand, how does this sort of thing happen? Her cousin had also worked with us a few years before. And me, I just was in question of, like, how could this happen? And not only was I questioning that, other people, but see, to hold a baby, as in pick him up and hold a conversation with him, and you had never even met him before, because remember, he was new to this world. And then the next time you see him is his photographs on the news that he died at the hands of a crazy man, right? Family, and I'm not going to say her name, she had to serve 8.5 years even over that. Because that's almost like being an accomplice, although you're not. To be involved in something where you know you're the mother and you know that your husband is literally beating on your child, and he would poke holes in the baby with cigarettes. He would do stuff like that. The baby was tore up. By the time they got the baby to the hospital, he was practically dead, but his body was so mangled and tore up, you would have thought he was in a car accident and the car got totaled. That's how bad the baby's body was tore up. But her family knew that this was going on. And yet nobody took it upon themselves to even go out to the authorities, as in reach out to the authorities and say, you know what? This young man is beating on this child's child, which was the individual in which I in fact worked with. Me and her is around the same age. She might be a year younger. I'm almost 40 years old. But to have a 1.5-year-old child, and for that child to be beat like a grown man and then put to death, where the authorities have to try to figure out what took place, just for them to sketch everything together to make a full picture to see what actually happened, that's a problem in itself. Because see, that sort of situation could have been resolved before it even started, before the baby was even killed. Her family members, see, I don't like stuff like that. That's what I'm saying. There's no snitch policy. It gets people killed. It gets people's lives taken away a little too soon. The man took it upon himself to drown the baby in the bathtub. He just did all type of stuff that you could. Why would you do that to a baby that's that age? He wasn't even nowhere 5 years old. He wasn't even close to 5 years old. That type of stuff you will be thinking that somebody beating on a child, the way that he beat on that baby. He beat on him once again like as if that baby was a grown man. I have never seen and heard anything like that before. That type of stuff you hear about, this story in which I'm speaking on, a real life story, is a type of story that you in fact hear grown women go through. And not a 1.5-year-old baby. He didn't even live to see his birthday. That in itself it completely spooked me out. Completely spooked me out. Because all I could remember back was when I held that baby in my hands. His mother, she needed to use the phone. I was in fact at the laundromat. I needed to wash everything so that I can go to the next state of where I was going with my brother, because him not having a babysitter and not being able to afford a babysitter, I had to take an 8.5, 9-hour drive to get there to stay a few months to play as his babysitter. Being the young good sister I am, I just couldn't understand. And I'm still not fully able to understand. But once again, that happened that far back, right? But it's so crazy. It's like, I have never really heard of, I mean, I haven't. Not at that age though, of a grown man taking cigarettes and burning. That type of thing has to be mental illness. And see, for my former coworker, in which she was the mother, she had somewhat of a, what's the word for it? A real calm demeanor. But she could be playful at times, as in cracking jokes. She used to crack jokes on the job, had us cracking up. But more of a fearful demeanor as well. She was more timid, I should say. More timid, were the type she will be an individual that would get with a man that would in fact be the one to kill her child, because she was so timid, not forward. And so, mind you, when I said that me and her worked together before all this played out, he was killed the end of 2007. Me and her worked together somewhere around 2003, 4, let me see. 2004, 2005 is around the time period when me and her worked together. I'm trying to think around the time I had got my car. Somewhere around 2004, 2005. Me and her worked together. Because I'm trying to go back in memory. And it's just so sad, because it's really, really sad, for the simple fact because that baby wasn't born around that time. You got what I'm saying? Me and her working together happened before he got killed like that. And so it's off the hook because she had 2 other sons, right? And she would be buying them Jordans and buying them clothes, and yet she was so proud to be a mother. She was so proud of the fact that she had 2 young boys. Them was her babies and all she spoke about. And yet after that time period of me and her working together, because that type of job that we was working was seasonal anyway, we would work a certain time period in the year. And then we would go off, and then next thing you know, we'd work the following year, come back in the season or whatnot. But how she bragged about her 2 sons, I could only imagine, because see, I hadn't seen her after that for a while. I could only imagine how she felt about that young baby, the one that got killed. Because see, I would work the seasonal jobs, go off and work somewhere else, say like the following year and a year after that, right? And then I would return once again. But me and her basically would like skip paths, as in you see each other high and by, but you don't really have a full-blown conversation like, oh, what's been going on? How's your life been? What, how is things? And so to see her, I would have never, to not see her, I would have never guessed until it actually happened. So she walked up to me and I was like, oh man, I ain't seen you in so long. She let me know, can I use your cell phone? I'm like, yeah, I gotta get all this stuff washed together so I can go ahead and pack, so I can move temporary for 3 months or whatnot. And she was like, yeah. And then this my baby. And she just seemed like she was so happy to have him. And I remember like it was yesterday, he had on a black bubble coat. That's the first and last thing I remember, was that coat. It stood out to me the most, even more so than his face. And I don't know why that is. Maybe the universe was trying to tell me something even then. I'm like, look at this little cute baby in his black bubble coat. I just remember that. It's like the universe was really trying to speak to me. Like, if you only knew what was up underneath this coat. I didn't know that, but my whole focus was like on that black coat. Coming to find out, when they got the baby to the police, him going off as in dying completely in the 4 walls of the hospital, up under that black coat was a lot of things that was completely unseen. To the naked eye, I'm seeing why I was standing there with her. The abuse. His body was completely, when I say disfigured is the word, the little boy's body was completely disfigured by this grown man. Police had never seen nothing like that in years. They said it. They spoke on it. It was in the news. Even in the local paper. That was a disaster in itself. And I was kind of in shock that she would even allow her relationship to get that far, because see, he was not beating on her the way he was beating on that young child, is what I'm trying to say. And yet everybody surrounding this individual, including the family more so, they all came out after the young child was dead and said, you know what, we knew this was going on. How could you wait till then? You could have saved the young life before, but you waited till then. That's why I'm not with this whole no snitch policy, because that was a first in my life. You come across all type of people that done been murdered or whatever happened, and yet that young life was an impact in itself, because that in itself, as police was doing their investigation and I was in question of what happened, this does not add up right. Police had to swarm into the hospital for the simple fact they knew either the father was beating on his child or the mother. But see, even more had to be investigated up underneath that. Because to take a young child 1.5 into a hospital and he completely died in the hospital is to know that something was done. When you're cutting off, see how they started cutting off his clothes like they do. Him being in and out of consciousness because he was drowned is to know Paramedics oftentimes cut your child's clothing off on the way, but not always necessarily. Sometimes that sort of thing doesn't really happen until you get to the hospital. Say, if a child is not completely breathing, as in transport en route to the hospital, sometimes paramedics don't always cut the clothes off. State to state is different. Law to law is different based upon state. Because you'll hear stories, well, such and such was cutting all the clothes off in the back of the paramedic vehicle, and yet for other individuals, that thing wasn't a possibility. For some of them, it didn't happen till they actually got to the location of the hospital, which happened with this young child. They cut all his clothes off, and his whole body was a complete natural disaster. A complete natural disaster placed unnaturally. As in a psychopath played his role and all that. I ain't never seen nothing like that. I've never seen anything like that. For you to be lancing a body with metal pieces and all that on the back of a child instead of a whip. Taking metal pieces and scraping all into the child's back. Like, who does that? That's mental illness in itself. And yet I was completely disgusted with her family for the simple fact of, they said they knew he was an abuser, and yet he wasn't really putting himself. How do you do that type of thing? How do you be a man with a woman and you completely bypass her eyes, as in beating and knocking her lights out, and yet you go for the child? How does that type of thing play out? I don't even want to know, and yes, I still stand in question of that very thing. Because she did not have black eyes. See, there's been individuals within my family, members, immediate family, who in fact have been abused. So you know, and you can understand and tell when physical abuse is being done there to even a mother. I'm saying there's usually physical markings, as in, arms, sometimes face, sometimes bite marks. But more than anything, what speaks the loudest is behavioral abuse. A lot of times, physical abuse as well as sexual abuse, a lot of times come forward in the realm of behavioral issues. Say if a mother is being beaten in front of her children, she's going to have behavior issues, because remember, a mindset that has been impacted by abuse has no other way but to present itself as that very thing of being abused by an abuser. There's certain behavioral issues that come forward, I'm saying, and which can be in fact seen by others that stand close to that house, as well as stand very close to that house, such as family, friends on the outside, or even teachers and coaches or pastors or general laymen or whatever you want to call them, right? Those type of things can be seen as in witness, because for a child to be acting this way and all of a sudden start acting this way, or even for some of them to start acting paranoid, is to know and understand that there is something in fact wrong with that child, or even adult such as a woman, or even a adult such as a man being beaten on. Gotta understand psychology. There's a role in all this, even in people being killed and undiscovered by the very individual in which played a part in the mess, the sciences. It's laser focus. If somebody is being abused, you usually can stand right next to them and tell that something is off, as in something is wrong, as in something is not right with that individual. Why, you say? Because they're being abused. And yet, once again, the very people which know that they were in fact being abused are the very individuals which helped lead to their demise and not saying anything. It's irritating. It really is. It's frustrating. I bet with even Asia degree, I bet more than likely that young child was being abused, either physically or sexually. I stated that how many times? I stated that in like 3 or 4 videos about the fact that I can sense that young girl was being abused, as in somebody was placing their hands on her. More than likely, yes. Probably physically beating on her and threatening her for her not to say, as well as possibly sexually by either her father or her brother. And yet, once again, you can only front a false fake for so long before the mystery starts to seep out. As in, stories being told, your stories like Asia degree. An individual like that, behavior starts to seep out. It has no choice. That type of stuff, as in being abused, cannot be hidden forever. Like they say, what goes down in the dark tends to come out in the light. Or who said something about what goes down in the dark comes out in the wash? Is that what it is? What plays out comes out in the wash. You know, all these different phrases and definitions, and yet I still sense and believe more than likely Asia degree was being abused, and other family members know it, as extended families outside the 4 walls of that house. They have to know. Because once again, to understand that certain individuals was creeping around at night is to never know what could have in fact led to her going missing. Who creeps around in the middle of the night? I mean, my thing is, to creep around at night in the middle of the night is to go on a mission. And hopefully not deadly being involved. If I'm going to be one to take it upon myself to creep around in the middle of the night, let me be doing something more important that gives life to life. Something that serves some purpose. Something that is going to, have something to do with tomorrow. To help into tomorrow. Not something that is going to lead in taking somebody's life. That's crazy. That shows mental illness is even involved in that. It's so crazy. Like all these type of situations of people being missing, coming up missing and killed. It was a local individual where I'm at where her husband killed her. She had a 6-month-old baby in which the baby will never get a chance to even have memories of his mother, because for a mother to die and a baby is only 6 months, it's to know the baby just remembers and sense the mother sent. But about a year from now, that child is not going to have one memory of his mother. The bond has been broken, is what I'm saying. And yet, this father husband took it upon himself to murder his wife. Murder his wife because somebody was jealous close to the family. And yet come to find out, the family wait on her end, her family side comes out and wait till she's murdered, dead and gone to say, you know what, abuse was in fact going on in that house. Why didn't you speak up to the authorities before? That's common logic sense. I don't care if it's my mother. I don't care if it's my father. I don't care if it's my brother, my sister, my uncle, my aunt. If I suspect that somebody is being physically abused in a manner of it's a threat to their life in the environment which they live, I'm saying something. I don't practice the no snitch policy. Because see, that in itself could be the very thing which gets you the individual killed, as in the one that fails to snitch. Yes, it can. Because you don't know how any of these individuals are going to turn against you when you're not saying certain things in relation to whatever. Not even in relation to them being abusive. Anything can happen. So if they're willing to do that to that individual, they're more likely willing to do that to you yourself. Which is why I'm one to go straight to the authorities. I can't be bothered with that type of activity. to get something out of my hands, as in not knowing who could do what, is to turn them straight into the authorities if I know that sort of thing is going on. Because I don't want them sitting amongst me anywhere in my house. Because if they're willing to abuse their wife and child, they more than likely will do that thing to you. It might not be in that same form of fashion, but it will be something close. Trust and believe that. I've seen enough to know how people do things. I have. And I'm saying, when I say no snitch policy, I'm not saying on adult crime. I don't care about that type of stuff. I'm speaking on child matters. Matters that revolve around children. Because see, children are too young. They're not old enough to have a voice of their own, as in being heard. See, some children sometimes can walk up on an adult, say, you know what, I'm being abused, or such and such is touching me. And yet just because they're a child, nobody believes them. They say, oh, young girl or young boy, ain't nothing going on. That's just in your head. That's just make believe. And yet when it comes out later that in fact was going on, and say that child gets murdered or come up missing, then everybody wants to get involved and say, well, I knew something was off or something wasn't right. Should have said something and spoke up from the beginning. Quit being stupid and foolish. And if you're mad about me saying that, then that's your problem. I'm not a soft-spoken individual over matters such as that. I'm saying nobody cares about the feeling in the area of, oh, she hurt my feelings by saying that. Why would you say such a thing? Because some people are petty in the realm of they know things are going on and yet they don't say. They wait until somebody gets killed or come up missing to say, well, I knew something didn't seem right. I knew something was off. You mean you took the time to wait 7, 8, 9, 10 years to say something? When you could have said something back then in a sense, blood is on your hands. It just has to be. And another thing, I stand in question of the Asia degree situation when people, supposedly eyewitnesses, said they saw her walking in all white on Highway 18 or wherever. They said that they saw her walking. I stand in question of that. Maybe many of them individuals trying to seek out their 15 minutes of fame. Who knows? People just do all type of things. They do. Because I'm wondering, if you really saw a child walking on the side of the road, why wouldn't you pick them up in the area of not allowing them in the sense to get into your car? Because even crimes are committed by that, say a setup of a child walking the road just to get some naive individual involved and say killing that individual getting involved. But why wouldn't you say, you know what, I'm gonna have to figure out a situation to get this child either home or to the authorities? Something has to be worked out. Even if you got the child, got him in your car and hurried up and drove off to the authorities. Like, something about that is like completely weird in itself, doesn't it? I'm saying there is no way that I'm going to see a young child walking on the side of a highway road and then just keep driving or circle around 3 times just to make sure that it's a child. There's no way I'm going to do that. Not at that time. An individual would take it upon themselves to pull up, turn their flashers on, turn their bright lights up so that they could be seen. That's what I would do. If I saw a young child and they're walking on the side of the road, I would turn my bright lights all the way up so that I can be seen by whoever else is driving past, because they might be in fact the authorities. Who knows? Well, I'm trying to see who this individual is looking like a young child, because see, to be that short in stature is to know in fact that could have been a child. And yet you still would take it upon yourself to try to see. I wouldn't have followed her into the woods, no, I would have not. Because even people get their neck cut off or whatever, sliced off in the process of trying to chase something. But that whole situation in itself don't add up. Unless they were seeing a ghost. Maybe them people thought they were seeing Asia Degree, but maybe they was in fact seeing her ghost. Maybe she was already dead. And I'm not trying to be negative. I'm trying to be positive, as in the highlight, speaking on examples. You know, that's not negative. You gotta, there's an outweighing process, you know, to not be so extremely positive and not to be extremely negative, but to have a balance in the middle. You could have possibilities, but at the same time, you got to say, you know what? The young girl may or may not be alive. See, I can't be bothered too with other individuals who live their life too positive, because those individuals could in fact be naive individuals. I've seen all type of things in relation to this Asia Degree process of people saying, well, maybe she was sleepwalking. The girl is African American. That's not to say that she could not have in fact sleepwalked on the road, but let's use common sense logic. Your average American young black girl is really not going to be walking down a street like that in the middle of the night. A young African American girl will walk in an environment, say a hood environment, because she know drug dealers are down the block somewhere enough to see her. And more likely she'll think they're not going to snatch me up. And yet they could, but she'll think in the back of her mind at that young age. What I'm trying to say is, a young girl like an Asia Degree more than likely would have not walked that environment by herself. Because first of all, to be in a rural environment, or rural, however you pronounce it, to be in that environment, it's to know nobody is seen in the middle of the night. And yet to be in a hood environment where crime goes on and all type of activity, is to know that a 9-year-old might in fact walk out the 4 walls of her house in that type of environment. Because as I said before, more than likely some drug dealer or a few niggas is down the block, and they really could care less about her because they're too busy in crime activity. So they ain't trying to get her involved in no sex trafficking and none of that other stuff. They're too busy selling drugs and all that. And yet for her to meet eye to eye with them is to know that she is in fact safe. Gotta remember, I come from the hood to hoods to know and understand this very thing. A 9-year-old child more likely didn't walk out that house by herself, I'm saying. Just saying, well, I'm going to walk a highway. Because to know that your eyes are not going to meet with another individual is to know you might in fact get snatched. Children think of those sort of things, even at 9 years old, trying to walk down a road where there is not in fact no light, but it's all pitch black. And even more so in the rain. To know that I come from the hood is to know that I've been surrounded in environments where hood niggas and other individuals, sketchy individuals, they're out in the middle of the night, and yet you still feel safe around them if you're 9 years old and you want to walk outside your walls of your house. I come from the hoods of hoods. A gangbang violence. And all that other stuff, and you're hearing shots ringing out, and you're hearing Crips and Bloods scattered along the way doing all type of crime activity. And not only that, people's at the end of the block trying to see if the block is hot, as if police is on the block trying to scope out their very criminal activity. So I know what I'm talking about. If I was a 9-year-old child like a young Asia Degree and I walked outside of my house and I was in a hood environment laden with crime like that, I know I wouldn't really be too much terrified because I see it every day anyways. So to see crime matter like that every day is to grow up in the environment. Even if you're not a part of it, but yet to live in an environment like that is to get used to that environment, in which crime and all type of gunshot rings going on. And so if you are to sneak outside of the walls of your house, even if you're in New York City and that type of stuff is going on, you're more likely to be 9 years old and not be terrified Because to be surrounded in a crime-laden environment such as a black community environment as the hoods, it's to know you see that thing every day. And it gets to a point where it no longer scares you, terrify you, right? And not only that, it desensitizes you. And yet for an Asia degree to never have grown up in that type of environment is to know that she's a scaredy individual. Enough to not go outside of her house and just be walking around. You got to understand the African American mindset of even young children. See, I worked in various schools. Yes, I have. As well as grew up in the hoods of hoods where you got drive-by shootings going on 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And yet I myself used to go outside late at night with my other cousins in the immediate family at sometimes 1 o'clock, 2 in the morning, being 11, 12, 13 years old. To be part of an environment where too much is going on, such as crime, is to be highly desensitized to it. Think what I see when I scoped out Asia degree, I'm like, you know what? There's no way this individual could have walked down the street, take it upon herself to walk down the street by herself. That's a lonely path in itself. Because see, many individuals that come from what could be considered suburbs, although it's rural. See, anything outside of the hood, I consider the suburbs. Yes, I do. Because I know and understand being African American what the hood and block to block is all about. And yet to go outside of that and say go to a rural community as well as suburban community is to know and understand people that have not grown up in the hood don't know how to deal with that type of activity in relation to crime. They don't. See, a young Asia degree might in fact have been naive, but still not naive enough to leave out her house. I keep sensing that. That little girl didn't go nowhere. She more like was killed and murdered in her house. More likely. Because I know how the African American mindsets work and operate, as in those who are hood individuals that grow up in the hood, which have lived in the hood all their life. I know how the intellectual black African American mindset operates. I know both sides, because to live and be part of both communities is to understand how each operates. The black intellectual as well as the hood individual that can't escape the hood or who wants to be stuck in the hood, as well as the hood niggas that run and operate the hood environment. I know across the whole span the mindset of the African American and how many African Americans are in fact fearful in swimming, and yet not all of them. Many of them fear water. See, the African mindset, it's not that the black African American has an inferiority complex, despite me in fact coming in contact with those type of individuals, but black people are known to be and be fearful of sometimes irrational things. That's all I'm trying to say. Black people a lot of times have been known in their past as well as going forward into the future and even in the here and now to be fearful of very irrational things. Yes, they are. Because to understand the mark of slavery is to know and understand that very thing of which it stands even in today. To be fearful of things which have happened in the past in the realm of slavery is to not take chances. So when I think of an Asia degree, and yet you have many that do take chances, why many are completely successful, and yet once again, the majority of blacks have irrational fear of very irrational things. And that's an understandable thing. Yes, it is. Points back to the past. Some natures are different from others. And yet to look at a child like an Asia degree from the outside looking in is to know that very child was a timid, very fearful child. Like say the average African American. And so to be a child and even carry that mindset of the African American of the irrational fears, meaning various irrational fears, is to know that child didn't take it upon herself to walk outside in the middle of the night. She couldn't have. She couldn't have. Because see, even your average African American fears the dark. Ask many grown men and women who are actually afraid, African American, to even sleep in a dark room by themselves. Say unless a TV is running or if a night light is running. Yes, many of them, in which they don't even speak on because it causes embarrassment. And yet for many of them, they feel completely not at ease leaving out the four walls of their house, even in the middle of the night. That makes many African Americans completely unsettled as in uncomfortable, unless say they work a night shift where they got used to that sort of schedule. Believe me when I say this, I understand and know the mindset of African American people. To grow up as one is to be surrounded by many of them. To live in different environments and be involved with those that have lived in the hoods of hoods, as well as be involved with some that have made millions, that have gotten out of the hood and actually could afford to live in the suburbs, is to understand the mindset. There's irrational fears there. Many irrational fears. Asia Degree seems like the type of individual that will hold many irrational fears. To not take it upon herself to just walk out her house and just say, let me walk down the street. Let me go meet somebody for the night. That type of thing didn't happen. It couldn't have happened. I can look at her pictures. Just like when I was a part of the community that I spoke about on Facebook, how that older white woman, Penelope Bax, came up missing with her dog Walter. And I said, no, police need to go back and look in the woods. More than likely, she's lost in the woods. She more than likely is lost in the woods. And not only that, she probably ran out of gas. Because I was looking at her photographs like, you know what, something doesn't add up. Come to find out, the woman was lost in the woods. She had ran out of gas. And she was located in a remote area. To the fact, police and all them had to fly her up in a helicopter as an airlift to get her out of where she was at. So to look at Asia Degree's photo is to know and understand there's more being there. As in a family not sane, where they could have in fact committed the crime, right? You can look at Asia Degree's photo and it speaks all over her photos. Ooh, that's that salad, I'm sorry. Green is always good. I got a salad right there. See that? Santa Fe style bistro salad. It's good. It's really good. So trust and believe. You can look at a photo of an individual and their photo will speak to you. Yes, it will. To understand me, to know and understand the flip a game of marketing is to know the game of marketing. See, each of us individuals that practice that very thing, marketing, and even sometimes traditional advertising, which is in fact dying out, is to understand you read a photograph for what it is. Photos speak to you. Those who understand traditional advertising as well as marketing know this very thing. We're genius at that game. So to look at a young child's photo such as an Asia Degree is to know she could have in fact be, what's the word for it? Let me think of the word. Asia Degree could have been a mischievous individual, as in a child that do things in which her parents don't know about, and yet not completely. See, all across her face completely spells innocent, as in Asia Degree is an individual that might have took it upon herself to sneak little things like children do, right? And yet she's not going to take it upon herself to put herself outside of her comfort zone, outside of her comfort level. Trust me and believe when I say a photo expresses millions of words without even completely saying it out loud. Asia Degree was not the type of individual to put herself outside of her comfort level and zone. That was not her. If you think I'm lying, go back and look at all Asia Degree photos. I can read photos for what they are. Asia Degree didn't take it upon herself to put herself outside of her comfort level. She was the type of individual, completely, you can see it in her photos, that liked it to be within her comfort level. That's what I'm trying to say. Look at her smile. Look at all her photos. They tell a story all their own. You could even look in somebody's eyes and tell and understand when they're lying. People that practice marketing and as well as traditional advertising, which is dying out today, individuals know the game in which I'm speaking on. I just said it, yet I'm repeating it for people that don't know. You can know when somebody is lying based upon their bodily movement, how they stand, if they fold their arms for you to not get in their personal space. For somebody to talk to you, or you're talking to them, and yet they're trying to withhold information and to know sometimes they stand like this because they don't want you to intrude on their personal space enough to get in and get that information in which they're withholding. People that are into marketing know this. They have to, because to study the science of human behavior is to know and understand what operates behind that. There's a give and take involved. And so when I see Asia Degree's photos, I had to save a picture on my phone because every time I look at the photographs, I'm like, you know what? This little girl was the type of individual that had a sweetness that was written over her, and yet she could possibly be mischievous, right? But once again, she's not going to put herself anywhere with anybody to feel completely uncomfortable. That's not her. It can't be her. And yet, who's to say? But once again, photographs show you a lot of things. Ask a photographer. That's why that's one of their best bets, as in photography. Individuals who take photographs for individuals that want to, buy, the buyer and the seller, as in keying up a package. To know how things are done in that nature is to know that there is a science of behavior involved in that. You can't just take a photo of somebody and say, you know what? That individual just came here in my photo studio and I just took a picture and that's the end of it. That's the end of the story. No, there's more involved to that. Even a photographer has to know and understand the study of behavior, as in movement, to know how that's going to play out in the realm of the photography work being done, as in begun and finished. A photographer can look into the eyes of an individual in which he's taking photographs of and can know if a woman in his studio is in fact being abused, or something that's going on in the realm of her that doesn't seem right, as in feel right, between her eyes. A photographer. Want to know something as in the detail, in the layers about an individual, is to ask somebody who is completely possessed in the realm of taking photographs of other individuals. They know. Photographers can tell you a lot of things in which they don't even speak on. They don't. They done seen some characters, probably felt some shady characters and all the rest. Yes, photographers. Because to meet eye to eye, see how I got my shades on? To meet eye to eye, I wear my shades because everything is always so bright, including this lamp. When I look up at the lamp and I look down, I can't see anything, which is why I got my shades on as well. But for a photographer to meet eyes with, say, a character or even a sketchy character, a photographer in his studio, he's to know and can understand fully that something is not right about that individual. Once again, want to know something, go ask a photographer. They'll let you know. They'll let you know when something is off-putting and not right. So when I see Asia degree photographs, trust and believe I know what's not right, which stands all amongst the family, which is why I spoke on it in the video, which could have possibly made some individuals mad, and yet who cares? Who cares if you're mad? Because see, when you really care about somebody, like you say, you care about somebody, if you really want to bring a Asia degree home, even if it's in the form of a body bag, if you really care it, once again, you'll get on video and say how much you care by speaking on her story to get more involved with that, as in placing it around. Because even authorities watch things in which you think they don't. Authorities sit back and they watch things. Yes, they do. Because remember, sometimes even them need an angle outside of their own angle. Local police and all that. And even the FBI above them, outside. Sometimes they need a better angle outside of the one that they're already carrying with them. They do. Investigators is what I'm saying. Because to have a closed eye as well as a closed mind is to not see everything in which is involved or could have been involved. That's what I'm trying to say. So, when I look up on YouTube and I don't see too many people, not a whole lot people, I'm thinking there should be more individuals in which it is making more videos or even headlines in the realm of trying to find out what happened to Asia degree, is to know people care and yet not enough. If you really care about somebody, you would do much more than what you're trying to say, speak on, or even prove in the written form fashion. I said it before, it's easy for police to sit back even in their car and watch a video such as mine or other people have made a video about this young child. It is. Instead of trying to sit in a police vehicle reading through text information, that is not going to work for long. The industry is shifting more visually, by far completely bypassing what has already happened of things being visual. We're going completely TV animated, as in all being video form. Many people don't know that, and yet to be in the industry is to know and say where the industry is shifting to. All is going completely TV, digitally, outside more so than just photographs and text written information. I can't get with the no snitch policy, not I, if it's children involved. If you're the type of person and you want to do crime that involves other grown people, then that's on you. I can't be bothered. More likely I'll walk away and probably never snitch on that type of thing. Because I ain't got time for that. That type of petty criminal activity. And yet once again, to know and understand that children are in fact being abused, and yet to never say, is a pose problems. And it can, and it has, and it still is. So as I said before, you know, the no snitch policy is the death of the black community. It's happening right now. Believe me when I say that. And some of this music that's being put out by some of these so-called famous rappers is helping to contribute to that, because you got some of them that in their lyrics and all that, see, to have followers of people that can't think for themselves, and yet they jump on stupid petty bandwagons, is to know even some of them practice foolish behavior and not thinking for themselves. Just because a rapper tells you don't snitch on, say, somebody that is abusing somebody, right? Certain things in that realm, it's still to take upon yourself to speak up and say something and be candid with it. That's what individuality is. It's standing outside of the amongst of the rest of the herds of people, as in the sheep who are fully asleep. Take it upon yourself to be a full beast like I am, standing right here in front of this camera, enough to say what I feel about a matter without being fearful as in the repercussions, if there's any. I know some people fear the repercussion, and yet you only live once. If it was meant and intended for me to die over some of the stuff I said, I would have died long ago. And if it's intended for me to die 5 years from now just for saying what I have said in many of my videos, then oh, so be it. I don't fear death itself, no time of day. I don't, because I'm not going to fear something in the area where I should have been vocal, or I should have been vocal enough to speak up and say something that is on my mind that could have actually pointed somebody in the direction, the right direction in which they're trying to scope out, as in help to lead them to follow, sometimes in a search and find. I can't close myself off to that type of thing. And yet people that do, that's on them. But don't ever be offended when I do play my part the right way in saying what I feel about stuff. You know, sometimes to speak up too much is to pose problems with other individuals, and yet you come to see to the light that if they can't really take the very fact that you speaking up about something that is very vital, important, which could save lives, such as stopping the abuse of a mother or a child, right? It's to know that individual was not right for you in the very beginning of you surrounding yourself with them. Because to stop stuff like that, abuse, and the matter of it is to say, I'm not going to sit around and be whispering knowing somebody could be abused, because remember, in the end of that abuse, their life could be lost. It could be, and blood once again will be on your hands, because you could have prevented that. It's all type of people around us every single day that are being put to death and dying, and lives lost and brutally murdered, even children by their own family. And yet family members could see it coming. They could see it coming way ahead, and yet nobody spoke to say anything. So I think I'm going to close this video. I said all there is to be said. But this whole dying and stuff is sickly in itself, and yet once again I hope this no snitch policy would in fact die out, because it's killing people. It is. Every day the no snitch policy is completely killing people, and just not people in the black community, but people of all societies, races, colors, nationalities, and everything else. I can't be a part of people that just sit and whisper. I can't do that type of thing. Because you can get fully pulled into something, whispering somebody, that it makes you yourself become a target, right? That type of stuff, I might as well just be vocal as I always have been. And just saying. So I'm going to end this video. I've spoken everything I felt that needed to be stated. In the no snitch policy. Seriously.